for that. So good morning, church. And thank you to, look at our kids. Thank you, moms and dads, for teaching your children so well. Look at them already tidying up, and we didn't even ask. Thank you, guys. About 3 years ago, I was invited by the Southern Asia Pacific Division to join them online for a training session that would help their children's ministries leaders get a better understanding of what the impact of trauma on our child's faith development was. And so this presentation, or this little sermonette that I'm going to share with you in the next little half hour, is actually a compilation of that and the messaging. And, you know, I love the way that God works. I want to welcome especially my girlfriend, Ems, who I met just for lunch, and we just caught up, and it was just so good to, you know, chew the cud and catch up and to see each other again after a while away. And I'm so grateful to see her here this morning. But the messaging that we've had, all from the songs that Kamoi chose. Kamoi, you don't know this, but that song that you chose, the first song, Does Jesus Care, has a very, very deep and special meaning to me. So when that was the song that you chose to start with, I knew that God himself was just letting me know, hey, I've got this. And Chona, your last verse in the Sabbath school is actually my key verse for today. And then Ravu, that story, that's exactly where this message is, right in that story. Because we talked about the children's story you were going to do, and when we talked a few weeks ago about it, we were doing a different thing. So when I saw that story, I thought, man. So this message is for me today. I feel it very personally. And I pray that if you're in the house today, you know that God prepared it before any of us even knew we would be here. And so I acknowledge, before I begin, the AdSafe work I was involved in prior to that. For those of you who may not know me, I used to work within the AdSafe space. And my boss here in our church, we had AdSafe training, and I want to acknowledge Paulini Durutawalasa. She's our AdSafe compliance person here for the Fijian, Cabramatta Fijian Church. And her and Pastor Maravi are looking after that space. I'm just assisting her in that space. But prior to now, I used to work within the AdSafe ministry at the division office. And but I guess I just wanted to share a little bit about this messaging that we did a little bit about 3 years ago. So I'm just switching this on. I assume it's on. And yeah. So in the picture here, you'll see our team leader. This is Anne Beaumont. So this was about 3 years ago. She was the general manager for AdSafe for the church, right around this division. Obviously, Glenn Townend, and of course, I worked as the team leader for safeguarding services for the Pacific. So my role at the division office, I worked there from August 16, 2021. And my role was to actually train and educate church leadership in the Pacific. So all of Papua New Guinea and all of the Pacific Islands, from the TPUM and PNGUM, to educate them in how AdSafe works and to introduce it in that space. Now, AdSafe, you might remember there was a record article back in November 8. There was this record article that came up November 8, but we launched AdSafe in TPUM on October 26, 2021. At that time, the Zoom was still a big thing because of COVID and that. So all of the training that I did with the Pacific was through Zoom. I had a team member over there in Fiji, Mary Vuloloa, who worked at the TPUM, and we were training the leadership there. So this is the work that I was involved in, and so we launched in TPUM for AdSafe. And then, of course, we went to Papua New Guinea the year later. But now AdSafe commenced operating in Australia and New Zealand in January 2017. So AdSafe's always been a part of the Australian church, the face of the Australian church. Australia and New Zealand. And it was established here, as it was established in 2017 as a response to the Australian Royal Commission into institutional responses to child sexual abuse. That was why AdSafe was actually established. However, prior to its creation, for AdSafe in Australia, there was something called Safe Places in the 1990s. And this was something that was established to help church members, church leaders, deal with protective services for children and vulnerable persons. In April, we went into Papua New Guinea, and we launched in 2022. Anyway, so that was the work that I was involved in then. And like I said, about 3 years ago, I was invited by the Southern Asia Pacific Division to join them online to do this training on the impact of trauma. And you know, this children's story here with the fence, the words that we say, the things that we do. You know, trauma is something that people face in different kind of ways. And I guess my background is really in education. And so the presentation that I'm doing here, I had support and help with from a colleague, Milan, who was one of our counselors or social workers that worked within the AdSafe space. So I'm truly grateful to her for some of the stuff that I deal with here, where we talk about trauma-informed responses to abuse and stuff. And so it would be fair to say that when there is trauma in our lives, we see things differently. So for example, this picture that you see up on the screen right now, if you've ever been involved in a car accident, this image will probably trigger you a little bit, okay? Because it was a traumatic event. And so you react when you go into a car, you're more careful, you're conscious of your surroundings because of trauma. Because trauma does impact the way that we connect or the way that we react to things. Trauma changes the way we experience life. But some of us may see God as a loving, caring Heavenly Father. We may lose a loved one, and then we don't see God as so loving and caring. Because I prayed so faithfully and you didn't answer my prayer. And so God doesn't, you know, because of that trauma, we don't see God in that same way. And so our worldview is impacted. And you know, there is a lot of suffering that happens around us and amongst us and with people that we know. And I guess it brings me to this key passage that I refer to that Chona said, that Jesus is there, and in John 16:33, as he's trying to prepare his disciples for when he will leave them, Jesus wanted to remind them of this, that I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world. And so I guess my key message, if you don't remember anything else from what I say today, is that no matter what you are going through, Jesus, as he spoke to his disciples, speaks to you and to me today, that we are going to have trouble in this world. But please remember that Jesus, he's always there. So what is trauma? Trauma can be defined as a psychological, emotional response to an event or an experience that is deeply distressing, okay? So trauma is something that can occur or that you can experience that overwhelms your ability to cope. So from what I've told you about myself, I've told you that I'm not a minister, I'm a teacher. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions. I'm going to show you a few pictures, and I'd like you please to respond and answer my question as I ask you. So let's start with this next picture here. Can you tell me what you see? Tell me, what is that? It's a log, good? Anything else? Any other words that describe that? It's a log. Some circles, yeah, I see circles, good. Anything from this side? Bark, yeah, you see the bark of the tree. Okay, good. Okay, that's great. So,
chainsaw marks.
Pardon?
Chainsaw marks.
There's some chainsaw marks. Yeah, let's see. The chainsaw marks, yep, cool. All right, so let's try this next picture. What do you see here? Go on. Oh, I can see this guy's a great student. Look at that. He put his hand out, waited to be asked. Please, can you learn from the child? Okay, Right, okay, it's a plant. Yeah, it is a plant. Excellent. What else is it? Tell me. It's a plant. Would we say that this is a tree?
Fig tree.
A fig tree. Okay, we've even, well, which has gone straight out there. Fig tree. All right? Look at the leaves. Do you recognize his leaves? It's a leaf for what tree? It's a huge, it has 3 letters. First one starts with a vowel. Oak. Oh, wow. Who said that? Excellent. It's an oak tree. Would we call this an oak tree? You don't see this as an oak tree? It's not yet an oak tree. Is it an oak tree now? Yes. So what? It's not an oak tree when it's like this? Wow. Isn't that interesting? It's not an oak tree when it's this size, but it's only an oak tree when it's this size. How interesting is that? That is really quite curious. And yet, when it is this, it's growing up to be this. So if we knew that when it was a little plant, it would become this, do you reckon we treat it differently? Maybe, maybe not. Hey, do you remember there were bushfires in Victoria just recently? Yeah. Terrible, terrible bushfires. Okay, destroyed a lot of land, and like actually in 2020, that was that bushfire season, and it went really, really bad. Things were destroyed all over the place. There were all these koalas getting burnt. You remember, you saw maybe on TV, some images where the koalas were thirsty and the people were giving them water. Do you remember seeing that? Yeah, it was terrible. And the impact, okay, now that's what we call trauma, all right, that kind of thing. So the impact of the bushfires on the land was huge. You know, it killed thousands of animals, and it, you know, the houses were burnt, and all the land was decimated. It was terrible. But you know what? The impact of the bushfires was also carried in the trees, in the bark of the trees. Now, for those of us who are from other countries, like maybe Fiji, like I look out at the church, you know, maybe those of you from Fiji, you might be more used to things like flooding. You know, we don't necessarily have bushfires in Fiji. We have more flooding and stuff. But you know that the impact of the trauma of bushfires is actually carried in the bark of the tree. And it's something that they call epicomic growth. That's the term. Epicomic growth. So, do you remember that image I first showed you of the tree here and the rings? So, let's say there was a bushfire. If this tree was cut from there, all right, or you know the stump was cut, what you see in the rings of the tree is the story of the tree's life. So the time when there's a lot of water and it's healthy, it's nice and round, it grows evenly. But when there's drought, maybe the rings change a little bit. And when there's floods, when there's bushfires, the story of that tree is carried in the rings of the tree. Now, why do I tell you that? I tell you that because I want to talk to you a little bit about childhood trauma. So, neuroscientists agree with the definition that childhood trauma is caused by any event that feels life-threatening in an age-appropriate way and causes more emotion than a person can handle. What am I trying to say? When things happen to a child that causes them stress or is traumatic, it actually imprints and stays on them. Now, this week has been an amazing week for our church because Tutor Liku and the team have been leading out in a week of prayer. And we've been listening to excerpts from a book by Pavel Goya, In the Spirit and Power. Okay, now, do we remember where Pavel comes from? Romania. So, now, I grew up here in Sydney, but in the 1990s, there was a study. What happened? Because it was a communist country. And what happened was one of the presidents at some stage had demanded that everybody that lived in the country needed to have at least 5 children. Okay? And so this was a requirement. Okay? And so, of course, if you're having so many children, you can't look after all your children. And so some of the children were put into institutions and had these huge, like places, you know, they didn't have NDIS there. And so they had these places where children would be put into beds. And I remember seeing on television when I was in high school. Some of you remember that time. Okay, on television there were pictures of kids inside in beds, row upon row, in these dorms. They were like dormitory kind of rooms, but babies all just lying there. And they call this thing, there was a study done, and I'm going away from my notes for Sabbath. But the point is, I wanted to tell you this simply because there is a difference that happens to our brains, okay? Just in the same way that our lungs affect our ability to breathe, our brain affects our ability to process information that impacts on our emotional well-being. You see a healthy brain on this side. You see the connections that are made. But if a child is left and not picked up, cuddled and loved, if we're not having that face-to-face with a child, when they're first born, right, what happens is there are gaps that happen in the child's brain. And it impacts their growth. It impacts the way that they react to people. It impacts their ability to connect. This is actually research stuff. And so that's why it's so important that the way that we talk to our children, the way that we connect with them, apparently I read a study somewhere that, the distance, the way God is amazing. Moms, those of you who've had the privilege of being mothers, not those of us that just came to the game late, but those that had babies, actually birthed them, right? You have this thing where the distance between where the child's eyesight, okay, this distance, that's the eyesight of a baby. So a newborn can only see the face from this distance. They're blind otherwise. I mean, they're not blind, but you know what I mean. Okay, so when the mother is nurturing and caring for the baby, she's making connection to the child. But the child's eye can only see that far. And these things are so important for the development of a child. So can you imagine when we talk about our church, and there are hurting people in the church, if perhaps as a child mom might have taken you to the bath and, just leave you for a minute and just grab this because you're cooking something quickly. And while she's turned her back just for 1 minute, you kind of sink in under the water and the water goes over your head and you're a baby, you don't know what's happening and you think you're dying. Are you going to be afraid of water? Maybe. Because of a traumatic experience. Do you understand what I'm saying? So all of these things are kind of connected in some shape or form. Now it can be overcome and stuff. So let me continue. Impacts of abuse on victims very quickly. Here we go. Okay, this is the impact. Okay, when there is trauma. Okay, sometimes there are mental health issues, anxiety, nightmares, feelings of hopelessness, impaired daily function, suicidal ideation. These are all things that impact us. But did you know that let me go back there. A child's first picture of God is their mom and dad. That's why mom and dad and the church family is so important. Because the way that mom and dad look after their child. If dad and mom are loving and caring, give boundaries to the child sees God as a loving, caring father who protects. But if mom and dad are like, go out, play with the traffic, you'll be right. Okay, child is going to grow up, okay, not having any boundaries, okay. This is why mom and dad, you're so important. Because you are shaping the next generation. And then when they come into our churches, if we've got our elders at the church like, hey, wait outside there, wait. Don't come here, we're still meeting. The child that thinks, I don't belong here. Okay, maybe I'll wait outside. Okay, maybe I'll just go down to the shop. He said, maybe I'll just go. That's why the way we love on our children. We still need boundaries in the church. We still need to tell them what. But it's the way that we do those things. So it's so important that we work together, church and home and family, in how we shape a child's picture of God. Amen. There was a campaign done in 2013. The campaign was titled, Children See, Children Do. Okay? So hopefully this will work. Can we just play the video that's next, please, Aaron? Is it Aaron? Is that his name? Yes. Okay, we'll just play this. So this video is called Children See, Children Do. So if we want kids to behave in a certain way, there's sound, this needs to happen.
Don't know how
So if we want our children to be loving adults, we need, as mums and dads, to be loving and caring. You know, Mrs. White said in Child Guidance, she said, too much importance cannot be placed on the early training of children. The lesson the child learns during the first 7 years of life have more to do with forming his character than all it learns in the future years. I'm going to go quickly to complex trauma. I'm cognizant of time, and I'm just going to talk really quickly through this. Complex trauma is when there is trauma, but then it's repeated, okay? And so, you know, it could come in the form like maybe, you know, your child catches the school bus, and maybe the person on the school bus, the driver might be abusing your child. So what happens is every time the child has to go to the school bus, they are subject to this abuse. And that's what we call complex trauma. And so, you know, complex trauma, it often results in direct harm to the child. You know, there's other definitions there of complex trauma. It's cumulative, repetitive, and interpersonally generated, yeah? Complex trauma impairs the development of self, particularly in infancy and childhood. And trauma, complex trauma, okay, actually happens because there is a power imbalance. So for instance, right now, I'm standing here, and I have the ability to look out and I can see everybody, because I'm standing higher, above everyone, all right? So power imbalance happens when, okay, one person is more powerful than another. Now, it can happen, I'm sorry about the size of the print, I'm happy to give this to you if you're interested, but like, there could be social power imbalance, okay? Maybe because I'm a teacher and you don't have your degree yet, so I'm more powerful than you. Could be like that. Or I could be the Sabbath school teacher, and you could be a child in the Sabbath school. Well, because I'm the Sabbath school teacher, I'm more powerful than you. It could be knowledge, it could be intellectual power, psychological. So power imbalance is how abuse happens. There's someone that's always more powerful than a weaker person. That's the way that it comes about. I might skip through this really quickly, the effects of abuse, but in a nutshell, when we listen to the story that Ravu, I believe the Holy Spirit went before, that Ravu and the fence holders did this morning, that story, the impact of trauma, yeah? Anything that happens like that, okay, where you can say sorry, but the marks remain. Remember the tree. This is what it's about, the impact of trauma. So, you know what, when we read the Bible and we read the Bible stories that are in the Bible, we see lots of these people in the Bible. I don't know if you've ever seen it through those eyes, and I want to just encourage you, just for a moment, to remember some stories in the Bible and think, I wonder what might have happened to them to cause them to behave in that way. They had relationship difficulties, okay? Maybe they had low self-esteem in the Bible stories. And I'm thinking specifically of whether or not they had addictive, compulsive behaviors, okay? But there are also spiritual challenges, okay? Spiritual challenges happen when there is abuse or there has been trauma. The lack of trust can show up in the survivor's relationship with God. And while others seem to trust God easily, adults who've been abused as children, okay, find it hard and challenging to trust in God. So I want to just show you this last couple of slides here, that trauma survivors have symptoms instead of memories, okay? And I want to go specifically to this key verse that I began with here. When I talk about, let me just go back, sorry, to this one here. Trauma survivors have symptoms instead of memories. So let's see some of these symptoms which you cannot even see, which I'm sorry about. I did that on purpose. There's depression, there's irritability, loss of interest, decreased concentration, insomnia, finding harder to sleep, worthlessness, little or no memories, they're cutting themselves, have panic attacks, chronic pain, headaches, substance abuse. These are all symptoms, okay? They're all symptoms of trauma. So, the effects of abuse or trauma relate to the abuse and not the person. This means that the troubling and painful feelings, behaviors, and thoughts people experience are a legacy of the manipulation, control, betrayal, and the physical assault that happened to them. I started with a verse right at the beginning which was from John 16:33. I highlighted this verse, where Jesus was reassuring his disciples that in him we can have peace, that he had overcome the world, and that though we may have trouble, to take heart, that he'd overcome the world. And I love this picture as I try to conclude this in some shape or form. I love this picture of Jesus. The picture of him choosing to bring restoration to humanity and healing to humanity. So tell me what you see here. We're going to do one of those things where I said, let's imagine a Bible story in a different kind of way. So I don't know whether you remember this story, okay? It takes place in this little town here in Gadara, which is like opposite to where all the children of Israel, where they lived, where Jesus lived and walked, up there in Capernaum. And I'm talking about all this trauma here. So, Jesus and his disciples are over this side of the lake. He's had a busy day doing ministry. And then he says, let's get on the boat. And then they go across. They sail. They sail across to a part of the land that there's no Christians living there. Okay? Just living across there. There's Gentiles, pagan, pig-eating people. They're very unclean. So, of course, for the Jews, this is not where they mix. Okay? But living in this place here, Gadara, there's a guy who is cutting himself. The guy is alone. He's in chronic pain. Nobody sees him. He's got self-destructive behaviors. Okay? I'm not sure what trauma that guy would have gone through. But maybe let's go to the video and see whether we can hear this story. It's out of Mark chapter 5, if you want to follow. Mark 5, 1 to 20. Thanks, Sam.
Demons went out of the man and into the pigs.
Go away from here! You magician! Leave us! Go away from this place! Leave us! Go away from here!
I follow you wherever you go. Let me come with you.
Go back home and tell what God has done for you.
Interestingly, Jesus restores this man to his right mind. Jesus brings peace to this man's life that he's not had for a long time. I mean, he was living there all that time. I mean, the people were just down the road. Nobody came to visit him. Then Jesus arrives, and then the people are saying, get out of here. No one's cared about this guy at all. Jesus came across and gave peace to this man's life and restored him to his right mind. But on his way across to Gadara, he actually had to calm a storm. And just like when Jesus was on the lake crossing over, this man found peace when Jesus said, as he said to the water, peace, be still. Jesus came to bring healing and restoration to this earth. Our world is broken and filled with hurting, trauma-impacted people. All of us in some shape or form have had that. I pray that as we move amongst our church family, the community that is around us in this place, that you and I will endeavor to look beyond the symptoms of trauma and truly see those around us with compassion. As it said in John 16:33, I've told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world. It's Paulini and Pastor Baravi and Tusemi and my prayer. We're the AdSafe team for the church. It's our prayer that as we worship together, as we fellowship together, that maybe our distorted pictures of Jesus will change back to him being the loving shepherd who truly loves and cares for us. And we can say that things are well in our lives because Jesus is a part of that story. God bless you.
I invite us all, if you can stand for our closing hymn. 530, It is well with my soul. When peace like a river, when peace, to sing. When peace like a river